The NBA really shouldn't have let the Warriors pull this off. But here we are. Jonathan Kuminga is back on a deal that actually suits the team, and honestly, that's just one of 3 reasons as to why I believe the Warriors might be the most slept-on team in the NBA right now. So let's start off right there with reason number 1. The whole Kuminga stalemate has finally been resolved. The restricted free agent forward agreed to a 2-year $48.5 million contract to stay with Golden State, which is massive for a couple of reasons. Most importantly, it's the deal that he didn't sign. If he had gone with the 1-year $7.9 million qualifying offer, it would have included a no-trade clause and made him an unrestricted free agent next summer. That would have been a disaster for the Warriors, because they would have been staring down the barrel of losing him for nothing. Instead, on this new deal, he's locked in at just over $24 million a season, which not only secures him for the Warriors, but also makes him a really tradable contract. If Golden State decides they're done with him, they could flip him at the deadline and get something back pretty valuable to strengthen their roster before the postseason. That's really important because his name was floating around in trade rumors all summer. Sacramento reportedly put a 3-year $63 million deal on the table as part of a sign and trade, sending over Malik Monk and a protected 2030 first rounder. But Golden State clearly had no interest in Monk. The Phoenix Suns also tried to get involved, offering Kuminga a 4-year $90 million deal, but they never really entered any serious trade talks with Golden State. And then you have a team like the Brooklyn Nets, who had a ton of salary cap space this offseason, and somehow they didn't even bother making an offer, which was honestly kind of shocking. But here's why all of this attention around Kuminga makes sense. What he did in that second round series after Curry went down with the hamstring injury was incredible. Over those last 4 games against Minnesota, he stepped up in a way that nobody could have predicted. 24.3 points per game, nearly 39% from deep, and a true shooting percentage of almost 64%. Those numbers were way above what he was doing throughout the regular season, and it really felt like his chance to audition as a future star in this league, and he delivered. So you'd think the Warriors would have locked him up immediately, right? Wrong. The problem is that when Curry was healthy, Steve Kerr flat out didn't trust Kuminga. In the biggest games of the season, Kerr wouldn't even let him play a single minute, barely seeing the floor in that first round series against Houston, and not playing in the play-in tournament games either. That kind of a thing really strained their already stretched relationship, and that's a big part of why Kuminga seriously was considering leaving. He just wants consistent minutes to develop, because he's a guy with all the physical tools: size, athleticism, ball handling, and you can just see the star potential. He just needs more time on the floor to work on the mental side of the game, and that's really the sticking point. Scoring has never been Kuminga's issue. It's all the other stuff: rebounding, help defense, and awareness. That's what's limited his opportunities. Those weaknesses were there before Golden State even traded for Jimmy Butler, but Butler's arrival made it even harder for him to see the floor. Kerr has admitted it's tough to play Butler and Kuminga together, and that only adds another layer to the whole situation. So now the Warriors basically have 2 paths. They can commit to playing him consistent minutes this season, which could keep the locker room in better spirits, and maybe even have him grow into the player he's supposed to be on their team, or they can heavily play him early, let him pump up the trade value, and then move him at the deadline for another impact piece to slot in next to Steph, Draymond, and Butler for one more playoff push. Now that the Kuminga situation is finally settled, it's opened the door for the Warriors to round out the rest of their roster. And this is the second reason as to why Golden State are a far more dangerous team than people realize. They're expected to finalize terms with 3 guys really soon: Al Horford from Boston, plus 2 returning guards, DeAnthony Melton and Gary Payton II. All of a sudden, when you look at the Warriors' depth chart, it's actually looking pretty solid, maybe even above average. bench. You've got Brandon Pajemski, Moses Moody, Buddy Hield, Horford, GP2, Melton, and now Jonathan Kuminga as your main rotation pieces alongside the big three. That's a pretty formidable group of guys who can genuinely impact games and fit into what the team is trying to do around Steph Curry. And the three players I mentioned is really where it begins, because these kinds of veteran role players are exactly the kind of guys who can push a team into contender status. Let's start off with Al Horford. He gives Golden State something they've basically never had in the Steph Curry era, a true stretch five. Sure, Quinton Post showed flashes last season, but Horford is a proven guy with years of NBA experience under the belt. Last year in Boston, he shot 36.3% from three on over 7 attempts per game. Now, I don't think he'll be taking nearly as many in Golden State, but the point is that he can space the floor and force defenses to respect him, which really can open things up for everybody else. Then there's Gary Payton II. If you've been following the Warriors over the last couple of seasons, you already know just how important he is to what they do. Defensively, GP2 is just so valuable, especially when you think about how much he covers for Steph. Then offensively, he brings a ton as well. Elite athleticism, smart cutting, solid passing, and the ability to finish at the rim even though he's undersized. He just knows how to play off of Steph Curry, whether it's setting screens and then rolling to the basket, or perfectly timing those backdoor cuts. And then finally, De'Anthony Melton. This is a guy who was actually with Golden State early last season before he unfortunately tore his ACL. And even in that small sample size, he looked really good in their system. In fact, his fit next to Steph was kind of eye-opening. When Melton was on the floor, Curry was averaging 37.9 points per 75 possessions, which was more than 10 points higher in the games without Melton. And De'Anthony himself averaged 23.8 points per 75 with Steph. Again, nearly 10 points higher than when he played without Curry. Obviously, it was a small sample size. I think Melton only played about 9 games for Golden State last year, but it was pretty clear that these two just clicked. Melton handles the ball well enough to take pressure off of Steph, he can defend at the point of attack, and he can knock down threes. That's exactly the kind of guy you want next to Curry. So, when you step back and look at it, the Warriors' supporting cast just looks so much better now. For a veteran team, that depth is going to be crucial. They've got guys who can step in, produce on any given night, and attempt to keep the minutes lower for Curry, Butler, and Draymond during the regular season. And that might be the key to keeping them fresh enough to make another serious run once the postseason rolls around. Now, the third reason why I believe Golden State is going to be such a dangerous team this season comes down to what they still have. The big three of Steph Curry, Jimmy Butler, and Draymond Green. We already know just how good the Steph-Draymond pairing is. I mean, they've won 4 titles, and they're the longest standing teammates in the NBA for good reason. Their connection works. It always has. But what makes the Warriors more than just a playoff team, what elevates them into real contender status, is Jimmy Butler. He's the X factor. When you slot in Butler next to Steph and Draymond, the Warriors suddenly looked scary to close out last season, going 23-8 with those 3 available. During media day, Steph even pointed out himself that if they could carry that kind of win rate over the course of a full season, that would be good enough for home court advantage in round 1. And he's not wrong, because that would give them a 57-win season. Now, that's incredibly optimistic to think that they'll actually hit that mark, but the fact Steph even believes it's possible should really terrify the entire league. Because with this group, I don't think it really matters where they finish in the standings. As long as they make the playoffs, I believe they'll be a real problem. And the reason why is just because of how smart these guys are. They're always on the same page, using their collective basketball IQ to absolutely tear down opposing defenses. Last season, remember, Butler was thrown in mid-year. They didn't have enough time to sit down and fully map out a system together, as it was all quick adjustments, on-the-fly conversation, predictions and just rolling with the punches. Now, with a full off-season and training camp, they finally get to iron out the details and really figure out how they want to play off of each other. That's exactly why this season, I believe they'll look even better than they did last year. The numbers back all of this up as well. Without Butler last season, Golden State were painfully average. A net rating of plus 0.7, an offensive rating of 113.9, and a defensive rating of 113.2. That is mediocre at its finest. But with Jimmy, those numbers jumped into elite territory overnight. A plus 9.6 net rating, a 117.8 offensive rating, and a defensive rating of 108.2. That's a contender. Adding Butler was easily the best thing to happen to Golden State since the addition of Kevin Durant. And I truly don't say that lightly. Butler gives them exactly what they missed. Secondary shot creation, switchable defense, smart playmaking, and maybe the most underrated piece of all of this, he gets to the line. With Jimmy, the Warriors jumped into the 99th percentile in free throw rate, putting up nearly 26 attempts per 100 possessions, compared to just 16.7 before he got there, which was in the 15th percentile. That's a massive swing. Those extra points at the stripe truly matter. And maybe even more than that, they give an older team chances to catch their breath and reset during game time. That's the kind of small thing that can win you playoff series. So when you break it down, Jimmy basically gives them a hybrid of what KD and Iguodala provided during those dynasty years. If Butler's fully locked in during the regular season, and then he's ready to go for the playoffs, Golden State truly has a real shot to push for home court advantage in round one and potentially win the title. But if he coasts to keep his body fresh, which we've always known him to do, then I probably see them finishing somewhere in the middle of the West, probably around the 6th seed. But as I mentioned earlier, I don't care where they finish, because once the postseason begins, they're absolutely good enough to beat anybody on any given night. I'll put it simply, I'm never betting against Steph Curry. And these are 6 more things that I'm not willing to bet against this season. And if you want to see the 6 things I'm watching very closely this NBA season, then you can watch that full breakdown video right here